Jill has a background in both art and science. Jill's work focuses on communicating human-environment connections. She incorporates scientific data directly into watercolor paintings to share the emotion behind these stories of change, whether overwhelming or hopeful. Her work is inspired by her fieldwork in places like the alpine glaciers in Washington State and British Columbia, and by communities around the world who are working hard to mitigate climate change. Jill's work has been featured on the cover of Time magazine, and she uses her artwork in education and outreach, working with classrooms to bring her data art curriculum to students. So with that, I will hand it over to Jill for her presentation.
Thank you everyone for coming. I'm really excited to be presenting to you today and share a little bit about the work that I do in combining art and science together. So I have a presentation ready so I can really share with you a lot of images about kind of what I do, and not just the art itself, but like how I try to communicate that and share science in different ways with people. And then there'll be time after for questions. Sorry, one sec. I'm just gonna minimize my video. Okay. So painting on the left is an example of my artwork. Most of my work right now is watercolor painting, and a lot of my paintings include some sort of like graph or data in them. Not all of them, but many of them do. And for me, it's a way to tell a story about things that are happening in the world and to have actual science data in them. And so you'll see that really like jagged line at the top of the water in that painting. And that is a graph, and it's showing basically the temperature near the surface of the ocean in the Gulf of Maine, so on the east coast of the US. And so it's showing how the variability of the ocean temperature is fluctuating a lot more than it did in the past. So the temperature is getting warmer, but one of the bigger issues is just how much it's rapidly going up and down. And so for this painting, I wanted that graph to be kind of like the top of the water, and then to show kind of like within the water, these different species that are being affected by changing ocean conditions. Having the fishing boat is that dynamic as well. And so just really using the visuals of my art to go beyond that one graph and tell a bigger story. So I work full time as an artist and a science communicator. So it just means I'm a self-employed professional artist, and I'll share a little bit about like what that means and what I do for that work. On the left is me holding a big mountain painting, a mountain in the North Cascades in Washington near where I live. And on the right is me with a student I was working with, and I'll share a little bit about that kind of like outreach and science communication I do with K through 12 students. So by science communicator, a lot of folks like in the audience might know this, but I still want to just kind of simply share that for me, it's literally someone who's just helping people to learn about science and in all the different ways that could entail. And so for me, I'm using painting to really share these science topics. But of course, there's so many other creative topics now, and I feel like the kind of art, sci art, as some people call it, or just like creative science communication in general, is really quickly growing field. And so that's been exciting to be a part of. My background is kind of a mix of art and science. And so I went to school at the University of Maine, and I studied studio art, as shown in some photos here. And it was kind of during my senior year there that I first came up with the idea of putting graphs and data directly into my art, and really was like pushing myself to make kind of this final like project, I guess, for college about about like climate art, as I was kind of calling it, and sharing stories about what I was learning in the science classroom. Yep. And then I also studied earth and climate science at UMaine for my bachelor's, and then stayed to also receive a master's in that. And one thing that I feel really appreciative of that program was how many opportunities there were to travel and do field work, and like to get paid to go to these places and get to go to unique areas of them, like going to Antarctica obviously was incredible, and studying how these landscapes have changed in the past or changing today was basically the nature of all of this work. And so like, yeah, just how are they changing with the climate, or how have they changed with the climate in the past? And I also did field work in British Columbia and Canada and the mountain glaciers too during this time. And so getting to do all of those experiences that are unique, aren't something that everyone gets to do, really inspired my career path and the art that I make in sharing about places like this in the world. I wanted to include some examples of some of the kind of like covers on the left of places. Like I'll share about the piece I did for Time, which I was obviously so proud and honored to do, but just kind of getting to share my work, whether it's on like a magazine or a book or in one or something like that, is a really good way for me to share these stories. It's not just like on my Instagram or in a gallery. Like there's going to be different people that are seeing those sorts of things. Like, and yeah, it's just going to reach different audiences of people. On the right is I'm going to be talking a little bit about the work that I do where I live in Washington State on the mountain glaciers. And so this is a photo of me in the summer, which is why I'm wearing shorts. It's still really warm up on the glaciers in the summer. And I'm on Mount Baker, which is one of the big glaciated volcanoes in the state. It's like the furthest north one in Washington. And behind me is Mount Shuksan, which is a really beautiful peak. So I'm the art director of this project, the North Cascade Glacier Climate Project. And so I co-lead that in terms of all of the science and logistics. I'm not just doing art, I'm there for every step. I'm planning every aspect of it. On the right, that is my dad, Maury Pelto, in the blue shirt. And so he's the one that started this project, which is why I'm able to, like a big part of the reason I'm able to be the art director of it. And so I help him plan every field season, which is a few weeks of backpacking in the wilderness and working on the glaciers every day. It's a really amazing and physically intense field season where we're basically going to the glaciers and studying every single year at the same time, the same glaciers, how much are they changing? And so as part of my role as art director, I also bring in different collaborators and artists and kind of like make it like an artist residency for them where we can take them to places they maybe wouldn't get to go, and they can make work about the landscape or our research. And so I'll show a few examples of that. So these are a few artists that have joined us over the years. On the left, a painter. Then to the right of that, a cake artist, which she was really cool. She basically makes it's like sculptures that you can eat, kind of about science. You'd have to look her up to see her cool examples. Emma Murray joined us this year, and she is a fiber artist, so she was stitching images of glaciers onto the fabric she had. And Sherry Macy is the person with the yellow hat on, and she's First Nations and is a photographer and videographer who joined us this year as well. Oh, and so just to kind of like wrap up on that, like getting to bring other artists in and have them make art about the science and about something that I get to lead and that I'm so passionate about is really awesome. And it's been a really awesome role to get to take on as part of my work every year. I also do a lot of data art with students. And so that can be like virtual, just kind of doing like classroom visits online, or it can be like visiting schools in person sometimes. So this was a middle school class that I was working with in Colorado, and the whole middle school was doing my kind of data art curriculum where they got to choose a graph about an environmental topic. Most of them were like to do with Colorado, but not all of the topics were. And then they are having to make a piece of art to communicate that and like tell a story about that. And so these are some examples, not just from this class, but from a mix of classes and ages. All of these are student artworks, like I believe these are all like middle and high school, and all of them have a graph in them. And so the students are like really learning and digging into like, okay, I have to understand this graph because I have to tell a story about it visually and think about like why it matters, in the world. And so I think it's a cool project for students to be able to like digest things that they're learning about, especially if it's like, yeah, something like climate change, and be able to like express it with their art. I also do this in a different capacity with adults. And so, of course, I don't have like time and busy lives to necessarily like make this whole like, art piece and like have this whole class. And so this is just showing some photos from a gallery show that I had. And when I had like a reception night, I basically brought in like just these graphs that were about the town. It was a town in um in the northeast of the US. And so the graphs were things like people would normally never look at, like would be considered like for most people really boring, and you just never come across them, like stuff about energy use in the town for residential versus businesses. But it's like, okay, but it's kind of important and like neat to think about for even if it's just a few minutes. And so people just had to kind of create a quick sketch or write ideas or kind of just basically creating like a space where they came, like maybe they came for an hour, whatever it was, where they're like with the community members, they're thinking and they're talking about the data, about the art. And so it's something that I really love to do. So now I'll get into my art and show you guys some examples. And I'll start with that timepiece because obviously I'm really proud of getting to do that. So here's a quick animation showing the graphs first by themselves, and then it fills in. Obviously, I'm so grateful for getting to do this, but I will say I think titles like One Last Chance are really harmful and wrong. Like there's no moment where it's one last chance to like save the planet, or to, like this was in 2020 when I did this, and we're still working. Like people are working so hard to help mitigate climate change. And so I think, yeah, anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that. But basically the painting on the left, I wanted to communicate like really kind of some of the biggest like kind of global changes happening. And so starting on the bottom of the piece where it's the dark blue area, that graph is about sea level rise from 1880 to 2020. So it shows it going up. The light blue area is about land ice decreasing. So by land ice, I just mean the two ice sheets, Greenland and Antarctica, and then all of the smaller pieces of ice like on mountains and stuff like that, mountain glaciers. The trees in green are showing the increase in renewable energy use for the whole world from, I believe that was 1960 to 2020, and so it's really rapidly increasing. Yellow is the increase in global temperature, and gray is the increasing use of fossil fuels with a dip at the top due to the onset of the pandemic in 2020. And so obviously that use has continued to increase, um, but it kind of shows how if we take global action, like there's going to be a really quick, it's going to be shown in the data. It's going to make a quick difference for the world if we were to act in such a big way. One of my favorite type of pieces to do is about incorporating what's going on in landscapes with like people or wildlife. And so this piece is about these coastal islands that they're off the coast of Maine. And basically like all of these islands are set aside as wildlife refuges. So you can't just go there. They're protected for a lot of the different species, especially lots of different seabirds. And so the birds with the black on them are puffins. And then the birds that are more fully white are two types of terns. And so all of these guys, need these islands as part of their habitat and are there for part of the year. And so it was fun to paint this for the wildlife refuge to be on display. And it's a really big piece. It's hard to show here all the detail, but it's like a little over 2 by 3 feet. And basically I have 3 graphs in this painting. If you kind of see like the really jagged lines kind of throughout the painting, there's 3 different ones, and they're just basically all about the population of 3 different types of seabirds over time on this island, and kind of like how that's been monitored by the refuge. So again, just like communicating like this is what it looks like, and these islands that we don't normally get to go to. It's full of these seabirds, it's full of life. You know, it's really important that we set this land aside, and it's so beautiful when you do get to like see it. So I want to kind of share, I think I already kind of have, but why I'm combining data and art together with an example. And so kind of like for a lot of folks, I think that even kind of just a line graph like this is something they're not going to like, pay attention to, or for some people might have a hard time understanding. I think there's lots of different reasons, and like most people just don't even become exposed to like graphs once they're adults. Like, I mean, maybe for your job, but like, for outside topics. And so this graph is about the work that I was telling you about in Washington State that I do on the glaciers and the project that I help run. And so the blue line is just showing basically the decreasing size of these glaciers from when the project started in 1984. And then it goes until 2022, but we would have I could update this for the last couple of years. But basically that's like exactly 40 years of change, 40 years of the glaciers in Washington getting smaller. And so for me, when I look at this graph, I'm not just seeing a line, I'm seeing a story about this change over time. I'm seeing um, the like hundreds of the, the hundreds and hundreds of miles I've hiked and elevation I've gained and like all the experiences and emotions of seeing the glaciers change every year. And so this is putting that same graph just over the photograph over a photograph of Mount Baker. I'm on the left, my dad on the right, or in the middle in the blue shirt. The two women on the right are two field assistants. And so when I see this graph, like I see this landscape where I've been working so hard and studying for so long. I've been doing this on this project for 16 years. So I've seen a lot of change. And this is the painting that I made about that project and with that same graph I just showed you guys. And so you can see the graph is the top basically of this mountain glacier. And I kind of, because I was making this painting about like all of the glaciers in the North Cascades, the glacier itself and all the mountains aren't one specific, like it's not like a real landscape you could ever see. It's kind of a composite of a bunch of my photos and stuff, which I like doing, kind of making my own landscapes. And so yeah, just trying to communicate like how beautiful these places are and how rapidly they're changing. My goal isn't to um like it makes me sad, but that's not what my only goal with this piece. I also want to show the beauty and kind of highlight like how important these places are and just get people to understand kind of how much they're changing and why that matters. So I'm combining data and art just to build these new connections in the way that we see the world. And my goal with doing science communication like this is to help people learn about it in ways that are more accessible and relatable. I think art has so much power of emotion and connection in different ways than the science does by itself. It can reach different and broader audiences often. Let's see. So I'm going to show like a little bit about my process in making these works as a way to like show one final painting. And so a lot of times when I'm making a painting, like so if it's like just a painting that I'm choosing to make, like just designing it all, like this example, like because a lot of times I do commissions or I work with a research group to make art for them. But either way, like there's a topic I'm going to be connecting with. And for this example, sea level rise, I'm living near the west coast of the northwest coast of the US right now. But before that, I was living on the northeast coast of the US. And I was like really close walking distance from the ocean. And like these are all just photos from my phone, kind of like year round, like seeing it and loving that landscape. And so just being someone who's mainly lived near the coast a lot of my life, I wanted to make a piece about sea level rise. And I decided to focus in that story and specifically on how sea level rise affects coastal marshes. And so these are just photos from online when I was getting inspired. And I have these photos, again, like just from online, but like of people going and planting grasses in these marshes because I decided I really wanted to show people and I wanted to show people like don't like taking action for this landscape. And there's not going to be like necessarily data, like a graph I can show. So I think I need to like just visually show it. And I included 3 types of graphs in this painting, or 3 graphs. One is just about global sea level rise from 1990 to 2022, which is when I made the paintings I'm going to be showing. The second graph is basically, as it says, like the percentage of US adults who say protecting the environment is a top priority. So it just kind of shows like, from about a little over a decade to go, to close to present, like that number slowly going up over time from about 40 to about 64%. So trying to show like that positive change. And then this graph is basically about wildlife refuge land being set aside. And it's for 3 states in the US. And I chose those because they're all the states that border the part of the ocean there called the Gulf of Maine. That's just, yeah, this really big gulf that borders all the states, and that was what I was making the painting about. Um, and so once I have my graphs and like my theme about the marshes, these are my real sketches. Like I'm thinking about like the story that I'm gonna tell, like why is it important? Like what am I gonna focus on and include? And I literally do these really quick sketches, which is what I was taught like throughout, whether it's high school or college classes, like thumbnail sketches, kind of doing quick sketches of like stories and like thinking about to include, and I do like dozens of these. And it's like the same if someone's more of a writer and like kind of doing rough drafts, and like your creativity and your brain can really get going. I mean, you could get stuck too, but it can also like you can start to generate better ideas. And when I work with students, I tell them this because a lot of them just want to do their first idea, which is fine. But a lot of times if you put in more effort, you're going to think of something better. And I'll take one of those sketches and I'll make a more detailed version just to decide like, do I like where this is going? I'll also either take or find reference photos. So for this, I went to marshes to take photos, but for some specifics like species, I'll find a bunch online and then um, basically accumulate like a whole presentation worth of images that I look through as I'm painting, because that way I'm not copying like any one thing. Like I'm not copying that bird on the top left, for example. Like I would find a bunch of images of that type of bird. And anyway, um, and then yeah, I went to the marsh to walk and take photos. Um, and then I start by sketching everything out with pencil. Um, so I can change things. I'm definitely like more of a detailed artist rather than like I do more freeform stuff, but a lot of my professional work is more like detailed and planned. And the paintings I made are like two pieces that go side by side, which is called a diptych. And so um, that's why you see the two here, and the green is tape to keep the edges of the paper clean. And I'll go through this fast, but you can see me like filling in, starting with kind of background colors. I start more simple and then add more detail with the paint as well. As we work in the studio space I had, and just filling in, filling in the landscape. And these pieces were really big, like each 2 by 3 feet. Which is another reason that was nice to work on two instead of one huge piece paper. And then these are the finished pieces, which again, like on the computer screen, there's so much you miss, but they still look good. And um, again, like basically I was showing a coastal salt marsh, and at the bottom is meant to be the ocean with all of these different fish in it, all species that really live in the marshes of the Gulf of Maine. But like I know a lot of the east coast of the southern parts of Canada and the United States have like so many marshes, and they're such an important ecosystem. So I have all these fish, I have different birds that really live there as well. And then I have people in the painting that I can zoom in on a little bit. And so the graphs in the painting, the sea level rise graph is what's making up the top surface of the water. And where it kind of like, if you can see, splits away on the right side and goes off onto two dashed lines. Those are basically within those dashed lines is the kind of projection window for future rise through the century. And so, yeah, so that's this here is like continued sea level rise, which it looks kind of more overwhelming against the people, which is why I didn't want to fill it in, because it's like, it's all about scale. And so it's not like as much change as what it looks like there, where it's like gonna swallow up the whole landscape. Um, and then this is zooming in on the other two graphs. The graph that's up in the trees in green that the people are kind of looking up at is the one about basically like US adults kind of getting behind like environmental protection. And then at the people's feet in yellow is the graph about more wildlife refuge land being set aside um, in the Northeast of the US. So yeah, I wanted to include people as an element where like on the left is a father and daughter walking. The top middle is a woman monitoring the water depth in the marsh. The bottom middle is people going and planting more marsh grass where maybe it's been kind of um destroyed in the past. And the right, as I showed, like the people like observing the landscape and the changes. And some of the different types of fish that live in the Gulf of Maine. and then some of the types of birds as well. So I really like to tell kind of these like full stories and um, have like these accurate details, but then also like this landscape is made up and I can kind of like design it how I want it to look um, to tell the story. And I was really proud of getting to show these pieces at my first show at museum. This is the PBD Museum is in Salem, Massachusetts, which is really close to Boston. And it was part of a big group exhibition. And on the right, you can see the title, Climate Action, Inspiring Change. So I thought it was really awesome to have a whole show that had that theme. It wasn't just about like yeah, it was about promoting climate action, as I said. And so that was supposed to be like the artwork, and it was supposed to be highlighting things that are being done, things that can be done, like highlighting more of those hopeful stories, because I think a lot of people feel really inundated by what's happening and what they can't do. And I think that's not like so helpful anymore. I think a lot of art and science communication in general needs to focus more on things that are being done and can be done. And people be able to need to see that future, that potential for hope in the future. So with my art, I'm trying to take graphs like this and give them like get more people to see them because they're really important. I know like just a tiny fraction of like how much work goes into just even producing one of these graphs and what that takes to do the research and behind the scenes. And so getting more people to see this important information, but in ways that maybe that again, like they can relate to more. Is one of my big goals, and obviously my art is just one thing of many to do that. Like it's not going to click with everyone, um but it's going to click with some people, and that's just my goal with it, and to kind of create these spaces for people to be talking and thinking about these topics. So I think that art is a really good way to connect with people about important topics, and so there's so many different methods that we can use, and they have different kind of strengths and weaknesses and kind of complexities that you can work with. I think that with creativity, science can be shared in a way that has more emotion and is more relatable. Being in being in the sciences for school, and then now being in it kind of in on kind of more on the sidelines, like working with science teams or leading my project. Um, Scientists have so much passion and emotion about the work that they do. Then that's not going to be something that they can always share in like their research papers and their data and the conferences and stuff like that. And so a lot of times they find unique ways to do it or collaborating with someone like me to do it. I think that science communication is really important, kind of creating spaces for conversation and action around climate change in everyday life. Like um, I mentioned that kind of adult activity I had at a gallery show of mine, and like again, just creating that little bit of time where people in town came and talked about these topics, because while I work in um, this like climate action realm, like a lot of people have lots of different jobs and busy lives, and it's not their responsibility to always be tuned in and taking action at all times. Like we need to create these spaces that feel accessible for people to go and learn or take action in their communities. I think that we all have really different tools and skill sets for storytelling, and whether we use them on our own or in collaboration with other people to share things that are important to us. And I think for me, getting to do that about art, getting to do that with art and sharing about climate science and climate change and climate action, I feel really grateful to get to do. And just lastly, I wanted to share that in case anyone is in like the Pacific Northwest or British Columbia or anything like that, I'm curating a group exhibition about glaciers and their importance in landscapes. And it's going to be at Slip Gallery in Seattle, which is kind of near like it's in downtown Seattle, and it's going to be for the whole month of April 2025. I don't have like something official yet in terms of like um a list I can like have you sign up for. But if you follow me on Instagram, or if you join my website mailing list, or just contact me or anything like that, I'll be sharing details about it this winter more. I don't have a name for it yet, but anyway, like it's basically a whole group of artists that I put together, and we're going to be making pieces about glaciers changing, but also we really want to make a bunch of work about why they're important beyond that. Because we think more people in places like this where there are glaciers need to kind of understand, like, yeah, they're retreating, but like it matters for your drinking water, it matters for all of the energy powering your homes. It matters for the fish, it matters for the ecosystems, matters for the, the rivers and the lakes and your reservoirs. Anyway, so it's like, yeah, we want to like share a lot of different things about how much glaciers matter. So, thank you so much for attending this and for listening. And I look forward to any questions you might have.
We just had one question here from Brenda, and she asked, is the glacier melting faster? You may have answered her question when you showed us the graph there, but, and I do believe she's referring to the Cascade Glacier that you're working on. But yeah, I'll let you.
Yeah, so in the North Cascades, there's actually I don't know the exact number. Say there's like roughly 200 glaciers, something like that, and then there's obviously so many up into um, British Columbia and Alberta and Alaska and stuff, and thousands. And so they're all retreating really fast, and that's really accelerated over the last 5 years, where um, they're just not able to have any recovery years because you need to like have good snowpack in the winter, but you also need to have cool enough temperatures in the summer where you're not having such intense heat waves, and things like that. And so it's kind of just starting to accelerate where they're kind of having not good winters and um not good and then hot summers. And so there still could be years where they do okay. Like there's still going to be years like that. But it's just becoming more frequent that there's just too many bad years, and so they're losing mass really fast, retreating really fast.
Interesting. Thank you. We have a question from Fiona, and they're wondering, what are some of your favorite and least favorite reactions you've had to your work?
Good question. Obviously favorite, like I'm at the point in my career where I'm still gonna like, maybe if you're like, so many people know about your work, you're gonna hear more negative stuff. But I mainly hear from people that like reach out because that they're taking the time and effort to do so because my work, sorry, there's a helicopter going by above me. I'll give it 1 second. Um, because they connected with my work and they want to like say so, like I spoke to them. So it's mainly what I get to hear from them, and I really enjoy getting to hear about like why, like that they like, yeah, just like kind of had that emotional understanding of what I was trying to share with it, and um that they really understood the story, and that the story I was telling was important. I think like least favorite are just sometimes where um like in lieu of really negative stuff, I think just like um when people think it's more like I still want it to be kind of in the fine art realm. That's just like some like a place I enjoy to be and kind of showing in gallery spaces. So kind of people who kind of see it as like, one time someone asked me if it was like kind of like a diorama, and I was a little insulted. And I was like, there's nothing wrong with diorama, but that's not what this is. It's like anyway, so that's all I could say for that question.
Thank you. Yulia is wondering, are there any upcoming projects that you really look forward to?
Yeah, I'm really excited about making new paintings for that glacier art show in Seattle. Because I have a few like existing pieces I could show, but I'm really brainstorming about like new work for. I really want to create some big paintings, which I really enjoy doing, but don't as much just because it takes so much time and like money basically to make them. And so I want to create some really big paintings about how like the downstream effects of glaciers changing, kind of like from the mountains through the rivers and down to the sea, where some of the meltwater will flow or inland to reservoirs, and fill that story out more. Um, and then I'm also really excited. I have one of my biggest um like travel things. I have an art residency I'm actually leaving for tomorrow. It's like at sea on a research boat off the coast of Chile for a month. And so I'm like kind of I'll keep packing after this talk. I didn't know I was gonna get it until recently. But anyway, it'll be really awesome. But basically my role is to make art for the research um team aboard that vessel about what they're doing, which has to do with volcanic eruptions and how they affect marine life in that area, which I think is very interesting. I don't know how it does yet. But my role in doing that is to make some paintings about that, and to like share that with the researchers. And so I'm really excited and nervous for that.
That's really cool. That'll be super fun.
Yeah.
Um, Pam said that your work is amazing and engaging, and they're wondering what has been the reaction from the scientific community, the data takers, the graph makers. Have you received feedback from them?
Yeah, and I feel like I've run into a few scientists who who haven't seen the value in it, which is fine, like fine and expected, but like by far the majority of people in like in the science community or data community, I feel like have really loved it. They love seeing like, sometimes something niche that they just do, like being communicated about, like if it's like sediment coring, they haven't seen like a piece of art about that before, so they get really excited. And also just being able to see some of the work that they do visualized. Yeah, visualized so they can share that with people more clearly. And then just in general, if it's not like specifically about their work, I think a lot of people see the value of it and really anyway, I've gotten really good support and feedback, and that's one thing that I do with my work as a way to like make my income is sometimes I make art for researchers where I could be like on a grant with them, and sometimes I get to go see their work in person, like their field work or something like that, and then make art about it and like share with people what they're doing and why it matters.
Cool. But I'm jealous of your work. That is just such like I feel like that probably just brings you so much joy and passion and yeah.
Yeah.
And then we have one last question here from Jay Lloyd. Forecasting is an art in itself, and skilled forecasters use a technique called backcasting, where the forecast mimics past predictions. What does your art do or see others do that are predictive, and how do you feel about predictions?
Yeah, good question. I think I get most of it. Because one thing that's interesting about some of my art is I started making making data art in 2015, and so obviously it's been almost 10 years, and now like some of the art that I made at that time, like those graphs are going to be outdated. It's like, oh well, this happened in 2016, when I made that piece, and so like that's one thing I'm thinking about is like I can recreate like similar pieces in like an updated style with updated graphs, but then also like yeah, for more like forecasting and predictions for the future and stuff like that that I'm um including. A lot of times I'll keep it broad, or I'll show like that there's different options for the different predictions for the future, like if it's temperature warming, the high level prediction where it gets really really hot versus the lower level predictions, like kind of showing that there's a range. Like science is not about being um exact in those area prediction, like it can't be, and there's like a range based on models and stuff like that. And so I think including some of that is good for showing people like continued future change. um and it's something that I've done in quite a few pieces, but still not most of them. But it's a good way to also navigate like my work not becoming outdated sometimes after after like 10 years and stuff like that.